Hello everyone, welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy. So current affairs analysis session for your upcoming State Public Service Commission examinations. So you all knew that we have been discussing current affairs from different subjects, and we have been discussing a series on environment, ecology, biodiversity and climate change related current affairs. Right. So in this session we have some more current affairs from the environment section and also today's few important news articles. So one by one we'll try to discuss all these important environment related topics so that this discussion will be helpful for your prelims examination. Right. So without any further delay, let's get into the discussion. And the first topic that we are going to discuss is that the Food and Agriculture Organization so recently released a State of World's Forest Report 2024. Now, in this particular article, one thing that you need to remember: which organization releases the State of the World's Forest Report? So that is how questions are being asked in your prelims examination, and you need to remember that the Food and Agricultural Organization. Remember that this Food and Agriculture Organization is a UN specialized agency. So therefore, this organization releases State of the World's Forest Report. And in fact, the theme of this State of the World's Forest Report released by Food and Agriculture Organization this year is accelerating forest solutions through innovation, and that is the theme of this year's report. And in fact, the Food and Agriculture Organization in this State of the World's Forest Report has also mentioned or stressed on the need for innovation in the forest sector. Now, innovation particularly to deal with some challenges. Those are, for example, in recent times we have been seeing wildfires or forest fires across the world's forests. So therefore, climate change related stress, climate change has been one of the major cause of the forest fires. Now in this context, there is a need for innovative forest land management strategies, and these strategies needs to be more and more resilient, and that is very important to ensure that the wildfires will be prevented or wildfires will not take place. And apart from that, this Food and Agriculture Organizations, this particular report has also emphasized on there is a need to shift towards the bioeconomy as well. So bioeconomy particularly emphasizes on zero carbon bioeconomy. Now why zero carbon bioeconomy? We all knew that carbon is a greenhouse gas. Carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and this greenhouse gas contributes to global warming and further to the climate change. And because of that reason, there is a need towards a bioeconomy, shift towards the bioeconomy. And apart from that, so opportunity from non-wood forest product should also be explored as per the State of the Forest Report. And in fact, there are many wild forest based food including fish are rich in micronutrients and have high nutritional content. Now with respect to this particular topic, so one thing that you need to remember: who releases the State of the World's Forest Report, that you need to remember, and what is the theme of this year's report. So these are two important things that you need to remember, so with respect to this particular report. And next topic is United Nations Water Convention. So we'll try to understand this convention in a very brief manner so that it will be specifically helpful for you in your prelims examination, right? So there may be a question about this United Nations Water Convention as well. So why this convention is in news? It is in news because recently Ivory Coast, a country which is which is part of the African continent, recently joined the United Nations Water Convention, right? So because of this particular reason, it is in news, right? So why it is in news? Ivory Coast recently joined United Nations Water Convention. So or it is also a convention on the protection, use of transboundary watercourses and the international lakes, right? So because of this particular reason it is in news. And some details with respect to United Nations Water Convention. So if you look into the genesis origin of this convention, it was adopted in Helsinki, Finland in the year 1992. And it entered into force in the year 1996. Remember, these all facts and data are very, very important for your examination, right? So it was adopted in Helsinki, Finland in the year 1992, and it entered into force in the year 1996. Now, whenever we talk about any convention, conventions are generally legally binding. What does it mean when we say legally binding conventions? For example, so there are other conventions also, Convention on International Trade on Endangered Species, Convention on Biological Diversity, United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So whenever we talk about these conventions, most of these conventions are legally binding. Legally binding in the sense that countries are legally obligated to fulfill the commitments under these conventions, right? So because of that reason, these conventions are known as legally binding. So it means that it requires the parties to this United Nations Water Convention to use transboundary waters reasonably and equitably and ensure their sustainable management as well. And one thing that you need to understand about the United Nations Water Convention is that India is not party to the United Nations Water Convention. So there is a lot of data available, and this is also very, very important. That one thing that you need to remember, India is not a party to the United Nations Water Convention. Secondly, United Nations Water Convention is a legally binding convention, and the genesis or origin of this particular convention, it was adopted in Helsinki, Finland in the year 1992, and it entered into force 1996. And recently, Ivory Coast, a country which is part of the African continent, became part of the United Nations Water Convention, right? So I'm repeating these aspects of this particular topic so that you could remember them. You will not forget them easily when I'm repeating them. So next is fund for responding to loss and damage, right? So in recent times, loss and damage fund is also very often seen in news, right? So we'll try to understand what exactly is this loss and damage fund, and when this fund has actually been founded, and what are the objectives of this particular fund. Now, whenever you get any question about the loss and damage fund, so you just have to understand one thing, that this is with respect to climate change, right? This loss and damage fund is with respect to climate change, particularly adaptation and mitigation, for adaptation and mitigation efforts of the developing countries. Now, so you need to understand one thing, is that there is a global south and the global north, right? So the world is divided into global south and global north. And in fact, there are a lot of differences between the global south and global north. So global north is a developed, industrialized region with a good living standards for the people. But on the other hand, the global south, which is underdeveloped, and infrastructure backwardness, poverty, illiteracy, and high vulnerability to these disasters, and all these problems that the global south has been facing, right? For example, if I can say, what are the countries which are part of the global north? For example, Canada, USA can be part of the global north, and European countries can be part of the global north, and apart from that, South Korea, Japan, Australia. So all these countries are part of the global north. But on the other hand, Latin America, South America, Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asian countries are part of the global south. So most of these global south countries have been facing similar problems. The main problem is that the global south countries have been facing higher vulnerability due to the climate change driven disasters. So for this, it is very important that they need to take measures with respect to adaptation and mitigation of these negative impact of the climate change. So that will substantially help in reducing the vulnerability of these respective countries. So however, in order to do so, the developing countries and underdeveloped countries in the global south require a significant amount of finances as well as the technology. But on the other hand, global north, which is largely responsible for the current levels of climate change, is not ready to provide technology as well as funding, because they have funding and they also have the necessary technology as well. So if they provide funding and technology to these developing and underdeveloped countries in the global south, so that will substantially help in reducing the vulnerability of these countries to the negative impact of the climate change. So I hope you have understood this, and now we'll try to discuss what is this loss and damage fund. And in fact, the Board for Loss and Damage Fund decided to call it as a fund to respond to loss and damage. And in fact, it was also decided that Philippines will be the host country for the Board of Fund, or it is also known as Fund to Respond to Loss and Damage. Okay, so I hope you have understood this. For example, climate change causes any disaster. Climate change results in any disasters. So I would say that due to climate change, cyclone can be a major disaster, and apart from cyclone, flood can be a major disaster. Drought like condition may be a major disaster, and even flood can trigger landslides. Floods can also trigger landslides that we have recently experienced in Wayanad, Kerala. So therefore, this is the fund to respond to loss and damage. Now, in case any loss and damage is caused by a disaster which is primarily driven by the climate change, the fund will be used for the adaptation and the mitigation efforts to the negative effects of the climate change or climate change driven disasters. However, so it is also decided that Philippines will be the host country for the Board of Loss and Damage Fund. Now, two things that you need to remember. The first thing, that the Board for Loss and Damage Fund renamed, or it will be called as Fund to Respond to Loss and Damage, and to this board, Philippines will be the host country. And so when we talk about the fund to respond to loss and damage, so it was established in the 27th session of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, right? So in fact, we all knew that Conference of Parties 21, where Paris Agreement was signed under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. So I will explain you the objectives or the goals of the Paris Agreement, but in a similar way, the 27th session of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change's Conference of Parties was held in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt in the year 2022. So I hope you have understood that this fund to respond loss and damage was established in Conference of Parties 27, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt in the year 2022. Remember that this is very, very important. I hope you knew about that. You should also remember this, right? So this is very, very important. Now, what is the purpose? Now, I've already explained the purpose of the fund to respond to loss and damage fund. The purpose is that this particular fund will help in developing countries compensate for losses and damages from natural disasters which are being caused by climate change. Okay, so the objective of the loss and damage fund is to help developing countries, underdeveloped countries compensate the losses and damages that they have suffered due to natural disasters, and these natural disasters are caused by, they are primarily caused by the climate change. And in fact, when we talk about the loss and damage with respect to climate change, they are the negative consequences, right? So negative consequences because of the climate change driven disasters, particularly rising sea levels, submergence of low-lying areas, and rehabilitation and resettlement of people who are living in these low-lying areas, and the problem of climate refugees and prolonged heat waves that we have experienced in India in last summer, and desertification, ocean acidification. So all these are the disasters which are primarily caused by the climate change, right? So climate change is mostly responsible for this. Now you should also remember the other thing is that this loss and damage fund was established in 27th Conference of Parties of United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change in Sharm el Sheikh, Egypt, 2022, right? So I hope you have understood about this particular aspect of the loss and damage fund. And next, Araku coffee, right? So Araku coffee is, this is a coffee variety which is very famous and very popular for its special aroma, right? So and Araku is a valley which is located in the Eastern Ghats of Andhra Pradesh. Okay, so it is very near to Visakhapatnam, right? So Araku coffee. Now Araku coffee found mention in Prime Minister's Mann Ki Baat recently, right? So Prime Minister Narendra Modi used to discuss about different aspects in his Mann Ki Baat series. So recently Prime Minister Narendra Modi also talked about Araku coffee, and because of that reason it is in news, and there are number of articles which are being published in different newspapers, and because of that reason there may be question on this Araku coffee as well. Remember that Araku is a valley in Eastern Ghats in the state of Andhra Pradesh, very near to Visakhapatnam, right? So what is special about Araku coffee? So as I have already told you that Araku coffee grows in hilly tracts of Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, right? So this is like a border region between Andhra Pradesh and Odisha, somewhere like this. And in fact, Araku coffee has also been provided the geographical indication status in the year 2019. Right. So the other thing that you need to remember is that there are number of other products to which the geographical indication status is being accorded to protect the originality of such products, right? So to protect originality and also make sure that the duplication of such product or to be prevented. So in order to do so, the geographical indication for the Araku coffee was given in the year 2019. And in fact, Araku coffee takes its names from the Araku Valley that I have just mentioned. So this Araku Valley is situated in the Eastern Ghats of Andhra Pradesh, somewhere here. And in fact, the weather of the Araku Valley is suitable for the cultivation of this special variety of coffee, because so the Araku Valley with its hot days and cold nights along with the iron rich soil, so that allows this coffee variety to ripen slowly and gives it an aromatic richness and taste as well. And because of that reason, Araku coffee is very famous. And in fact, there are also a lot of efforts to export this special coffee variety and also internationalize this variety. And in fact, there's also a lot of growing demand at the international level for this particular coffee variety, and that is why it is in use. Now remember that about the coffee board, UPSC asked a question in the year 2023. Right, so this is also a very important question, right? So a very important topic, so based on which there may be questions in your examination as well, and that's why we have been discussing this. And some other aspects with respect to the coffee plantation, what sort of a climate is required for the coffee plantation, right? So this is not just with respect to Araku coffee, but in general, what sort of a climate is required for the coffee cultivation. So coffee cultivation, the coffee plantation require hot and humid, so that means 15 to 28 degrees Celsius of temperatures, along with the dry weather is important at the time of ripening of the coffee berries. And this is what the weather conditions should be for the coffee production. And because of this particular reason, because this climate is very popular and very famous in Karnataka and parts of Tamil Nadu and Kerala region, right? So there are huge coffee plantations as well. So rainfall should also be around 150 to 250 millimeter. Now if you look at the Western Ghats, particularly the windward side of the Western Ghats, so windward side of the Western Ghats receive huge rainfall. We all knew about that. More than 200 centimeters of rainfall would be received by the windward side of the Western Ghats. And apart from that, the suitable climatic conditions supports coffee plantation in both Karnataka, Kerala and parts of Tamil Nadu as well, particularly Nilgiris, right? So in those areas. And when we talk about the rainfall location, rainforest of Western Ghats is the most suitable for the cultivation of coffee. And in fact, in terms of states, the largest coffee producer in India is Karnataka. So Karnataka is in the top place in terms of coffee production, followed by Kerala is in the second place, and Tamil Nadu third place, and Andhra Pradesh is in the fourth place. Now what you have to do, so you just have to come in an anti-clockwise direction. So you just have to understand this in an anti-clockwise direction, starting from Karnataka, Kerala, Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, right? So the states which produce the largest amount of coffee. And in fact, at the global level, India is in the 6th highest. So India is in the 6th position. That means India is the 6th largest producer of coffee in the world. Because so Brazil is the largest producer of coffee in the world, but India is in the 6th position, because only 4 states we have which produces coffee with huge concentration or on a huge land, right? So in fact, 65 to 70% of the coffee that is produced in India is very often exported, right? So one of them is Araku coffee as well. And there are some different varieties of coffee. For example, Liberica is a variety of coffee, Arabica is another variety, Robusta, and Excelsa. So these are some of the varieties of the coffee, right? And there's also a detailed comparison given between Robusta coffee and the Arabica coffee, but this is not that much important, but you can also go through it. And next is Unmingla Pass, right? So this Unmingla Pass is also in news, because remember that these passes, so they are between India and China, India and Bhutan. So India and other countries, and within India also there are a number of passes throughout Himalayas. So these passes are very, very important, but recently some passes are in news, and because of that reason, so we have been discussing this. So the pass is known as Unmingla Pass. And why it is in news? So it is in news because of some reasons. This Unmingla Pass is located above 19,024 feet above the sea level in eastern Ladakh along the Ladakh range, right? So this Unmingla Pass is located in the eastern Ladakh. However, this is renowned for being the highest motorable road in the world, right? So this is the highest motorable road in the world, and this Unmingla Pass road has been constructed by the Border Roads Organization under Project Himank. Okay, so the Border Roads Organization has taken up, started a project called Project Himang. Under this Project Himang, the Border Roads Organization constructed the highest motorable road in the world. And in fact, so it is a geostrategically a very, very important road because it improves connectivity to the line of actual control. And what is the line of actual control? This is an undemarcated border between India and China, right? So LAC is an undemarcated border between India and China. And in recent times, there are conflicts, particularly China showing military aggression at the line of actual control. There were Galwan clashes and clashes in different parts of Ladakh. So that took place, right? So it is strategically very, very important because it improves connectivity to the line of actual control. And another thing that you need to remember is that China has been constructing infrastructure, building infrastructure on its side of LAC. However, still India lagged behind in terms of developing infrastructure on its side of the line of actual control. However, recently Union government decided to build infrastructure across the border villages under Vibrant Villages program, right? So it has launched Vibrant Villages program. Under the Vibrant Villages program, the Union government will build infrastructure across the border areas, and that will help improve connectivity to the line of actual control. However, in comparison to China, India still lags behind in terms of developing infrastructure. However, so this particular road improves local connectivity in Chismle-Domchek sector to Leh and also boosts tourism in Ladakh, and other important passes in Ladakh including Khardungla Pass, Changla Pass and Tanglang La Pass. So these are different passes in Ladakh, right? So you have to understand that there were different passes, right? So for example, the Rohtang Pass, where it is located, and so all these passes are very, very important. Please go through these passes, right? So Jojila Pass, Khardungla Pass, Changla Pass, right? So they are important for the exam perspective. So because this particular pass is located in which state, so that's how questions are being asked, right? So you have to go through all the passes in Ladakh, Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand, and also Sikkim, Arunachal Pradesh regions. Next, Asian Disaster Preparedness Center. So this is also important, right? So because of some reasons, the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center is recently in news. So recently, India has taken over the chair of Asia Disaster Preparedness Center from the People's Republic of China for the year 24-25. So because of that particular reason, this Asian Disaster Preparedness Center is in news, right? So India has recently taken over the chair of the Asia Disaster Preparedness Center from the People's Republic of China for the year of 2024-25. And some details with respect to Asian Disaster Preparedness Center: it is an autonomous international organization, right? And apart from that, this international organization particularly promotes cooperation in and implementation of disaster risk reduction and also building climate resilience in Asia and the Pacific region, right? So by the just understanding the name, just looking at the name, you can understand that this enhances or ensures cooperation between all the countries in the region for disaster risk reduction, disaster mitigation in the Asia and Pacific region. Now, other thing that you need to remember is that India and 8 neighboring countries are the founding members of the Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, right? So India has 8 neighboring countries. So please try to mention what are those 8 neighboring countries of India in the comment section. And India, along with its 8 8 neighboring countries are the founding members. So now founding members means that, so when this Asian Disaster Preparedness Center was established, India and its neighbors were the countries which founded this Asian Disaster Preparedness Center, which are part of the foundation of this particular center. Now, when it was established in the year 1986, and in fact it was established as a regional disaster preparedness center in Thailand, Bangkok. Right, so you should remember these things with respect to this particular article. And next is about Nil Kurinji. So we'll try to understand what exactly is Nil Kurinji, and in recent times also it is very often in news. Right, so Nil Kurinji is a flower. Right, so Nil Kurinji is a flower, or it is a shrub, and it is one of the largest, and in fact it blooms every 12 years. Now it blooms once in a 12 years, and in fact it is also a semelparous. That means a single reproductive episode before the death. Right, so this particular shrub only has a single reproductive episode before its death, and because of that reason it is known as a semelparous. Right, so you should also remember this. And why this Nil Kurinji shrub or Nil Kurinji flower is in news? Because recently the International Union for Conservation of Nature, in its official red list of threatened species, has identified or recognized Nil Kurinji as a vulnerable species. Right, so it is a vulnerable species. Right, so you should have to remember that IUCN recently accorded the vulnerable category status to the Nil Kurinji flower, and that's why it is in news. So what is this Nil Kurinji? It is a shrub known for massive blooming every 12 years, and in fact now once in 12 years it generally blooms. And in fact it is also a semelparous, so that means a single reproductive episode before having its death. Now what is the location of this Nil Kurinji shrub? So its location including Shola grasslands of Western Ghats, the Nilgiri Hills, Palani Hills, and Erivakulam Hills in Munnar, and also the Chevroy Hills in the Eastern Ghats. Right, so Chevroy Hills of Eastern Ghats, and apart from that the Nilgiri Hills, Shola grasslands, Palani Hills, as well as Erivakulam Hills of Munnar, which are part of the Western Ghats. Okay, so this is the location of the Nil Kurinji flowering shrub. However, this Nil Kurinji shrub has been facing a number of threats, particularly tea and softwood plantations in the habitat of the Nil Kurinji flowers, and urbanization and invasive of exotic alien species such as eucalyptus, black wattle, etc. Right, so invasive alien species posing a threat to native endemic ecosystem in the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats as well. And apart from that, the anthropogenic aspects such as increased urbanization, deforestation, tea plantation, as well as softwood plantation are some of the threats that this Nil Kurinji plant has been facing. Right, so in fact this shrub is known as Nil Kurinji. However, the flowers are also known as Kurinji flowers. What is special about this Nil Kurinji shrub? The speciality is that it is known for massive blooming once in 12 years, and because of that reason it is very, very special. Right, so this is the location of Nil Kurinji flowers. Okay, so in Nil Kurinji, Nila means blue and Kurunji refers to the flowers. So it means blue flowers, and the flowers, Nil Kurinji flowers, looks similar to this image. And flowers give Nilgiri mountain ranges its name. At maturity, the light blue color of flowers changes to purple bluish. So we knew that there are Nilgiri mountains in Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and this Karnataka adjoining regions. So Nilgiris because of the Nil Kurinji shrub. And the next topic is the State of World's Mangroves 2024 report has been released, and we'll try to understand who released this State of World's Mangrove report 2024 and what are the important aspects of this mangrove forest in India. So a recent report, the report named the State of the World's Mangroves, State of the World's Mangroves, a report that was released on World Mangrove Day that was observed 26 July every year by the Global Mangrove Alliance, right? So there is Global Mangrove Alliance. So this Global Mangrove Alliance was established primarily to protect and conserve the mangrove ecosystem. Protect and conserve the mangrove ecosystem, right? So this Global Mangrove Alliance also releases a report, the State of the World's Mangroves. In a similar way, on World Mangrove Day that is observed every year on 26th July, right? So Mangrove Day is observed 26th July every year, the World Mangrove Day. The Global Mangrove Alliance has released the State of the World's Mangroves 2024 report. Now, what are the key highlights of the mangroves, right? So the mangrove report released by the World Global Mangrove Alliance. Now, all over the world, if you look at the mangrove forests, so Southeast Asia has about 1/3 of all mangroves globally, right? So 1/3 of all mangroves are located in the South Asia alone, right? So Southeast Asia, right? So Southeast Asia consisting of Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Philippines, and some parts of India, Sri Lanka, Andaman and Nicobar Islands. So therefore, 1/3 of the global mangroves are found in the Southeast Asia alone, and Indonesia alone contributing to around 21% of the world's mangroves. So therefore, Indonesia is the country which is having a huge mangrove forest, right? So it is further followed by West Asia and then Central Asia. So this is how mangrove ecosystem or mangrove forests are distributed across the world. However, half of the world's mangrove provinces are considered threatened by the IUCN Red List of Mangrove Ecosystems, because IUCN also categorizes mangrove species based on the threat that they have been facing, and half of the world's mangrove provinces are considered threatened by the IUCN Red List of Threatened Species. And mangroves in Lakshadweep Islands of India and the coast of Tamil Nadu are critically endangered category as per IUCN list of threatened species for the mangrove ecosystem. So I hope you have understood this, right? So with respect to the State of World's Mangrove report, it is released by the Global Mangrove Alliance. Now when it released, so it was released on World Mangrove Day that is observed on 26th July every year. And apart from that, Southeast Asia alone accounts for 1/3 of the global mangrove forest, and Indonesia alone accounts for 21% of the global mangrove forest, and half of the world's mangrove forests or mangrove provinces are categorized as threatened, and Lakshadweep mangroves and mangroves in Tamil Nadu coast have been categorized as the critically endangered mangrove provinces. And in fact, what is the importance of mangroves and why we need to emphasize on mangroves, right? So in recent times, due to global warming, what has been happening? So melting of glaciers. So with the melting of glaciers, there is an increase in the sea levels. So increasing sea levels would leads to the submergence of low-lying areas. So when we have the mangrove belt over the coastal areas, so that could prevent, to some extent, water entering into the habitations. And apart from that, it could absorb the impact of tsunamis, and thereby preventing the loss of life and damage to the property. And apart from that, it could also prevent the coastal erosion as well. And apart from coastal erosion during cyclones, the impact of the cyclones, particularly the storm surge impact, can be absorbed, and that can be reduced by these mangrove forests. And mangrove forests are also known for their huge diversity, the best of ecosystem, because mangrove forests develop in a region which is also known as ecotone, right? So the mangrove forest area is also known as ecotone, and that is the region where the fresh water mixes with the saline water, and that provides best conditions for the growth and development of the mangrove forest. And mangrove forest also a habitat of a wide variety of plant and animal species, right? So it supports huge and rich biodiversity, and because of that reason and other important reasons, particularly because of increasing intensity and frequency of climate change driven disasters, it is very important to conserve these mangrove forests. And the other thing that we need to talk about, so mangrove forests also absorb a huge amount of carbon dioxide emitted by the countries. So a number of countries have the goal of becoming net zero. For example, India plans to become net zero by the year 2070. So in order to become net zero, so we need to do a lot of afforestation, and mangrove forest conservation and afforestation is also part of that as well. So only then we could become net zero. So however, if you look at the mangrove plantation in India, for example, the largest mangrove forest, is in Sundarbans, right? So Sundarbans is known as one of the largest mangrove forest, followed by Mahanadi mangroves, Krishna Godavari mangrove, and Kaveri deltaic mangroves. And in Andaman and Nicobar Islands also you can see mangrove forests. In Goa, mangrove forest, Ratnagiri mangrove forest in Maharashtra, and mangrove of Gujarat, particularly Kutch region. And apart from that, in Lakshadweep also you could see the mangrove forests, right? So mangrove forests in Lakshadweep and also Tamil Nadu coast are categorized as critically endangered mangrove ecosystem. However, in order to protect, conserve, and also further enhance awareness regarding the conservation of mangrove forests, Union government has launched a program called MISTI. So it means Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitats and Tangible Incomes, and that is the program which is known as MISTI program, and it was launched in the year 2023 June 5th, right? So you should also remember the dates, because dates are also asked in examination, your prelims examination, particularly the state public service commission examination. Dates are also being asked, so you should also remember, that would be better, right? So the Mangrove Initiative for Shoreline Habitat and Intangible Incomes is a program for the protection and conservation of mangrove ecosystem that was launched by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on 5th June 2023. And what is special about 5th June? So on 5th June every year, World Environment Day is celebrated. So World Environment Day is on 5th June every year. And in fact, so the objective of this MISTI program is to help restoration of mangrove forests by undertaking mangrove reforestation, afforestation measures along the coast of India, because we have a huge coast, right? So it is very important that we have around 7,500 kilometers long coastline. So there's a lot of potential for the restoration and reforestation and afforestation of this mangrove ecosystem involving the local communities, and because of that reason this MISTI program has been launched, right? So I hope you have understood about this MISTI program. Okay, and next is a climate finance action fund. So we'll try to understand what exactly is this climate finance action fund. So recently Azerbaijan, which is going to host COP29 United Nations Conference on Climate Change, Framework Convention on Climate Change, Azerbaijan launched, Azerbaijan's Baku will host United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change's COP29 Climate Summit. On the eve of it, Azerbaijan launches Climate Finance Action Fund. Now there may be a question that which country has launched Climate Finance Action Fund? Azerbaijan has launched Climate Action Finance Fund. Which country is hosting Conference of Parties 29 as part of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change? Again, Azerbaijan is launching this. Azerbaijan is hosting the Conference of Parties 29, right? And in fact, so when we talk about some details with respect to Climate Finance Action Fund, the headquarter of the Climate Finance Action Fund is Azerbaijan's capital, Baku. And in fact, the Climate Finance Action Fund will support the climate projects in developing countries. Now, what are the projects which are considered as climate projects? For example, renewable development can be a climate project, and helping countries developing infrastructure which is resilient to the disasters can be a climate project. And also helping countries to make a transition towards a green economy can also be considered as a climate project. So therefore the Climate Finance Action Fund will support the climate projects in different developing countries, thereby meeting the next generation of nationally determined contributions. Now, what are these nationally determined contributions? So in previous class also I have explained about these nationally determined contributions. So every country which is party to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change must be obligated to meet the commitments that they have announced to reduce or to mitigate the emission of greenhouse gases. And those commitments are known as the nationally determined contributions, or they are also known as intended nationally determined contributions. So it is very important that the developing countries and the underdeveloped countries should be adequately equipped, they should develop the capacities to meet their nationally determined contributions, and this will help in limiting the global temperatures below 1.5 degree Celsius of pre-industrial levels. Remember that we have the Conference of Parties 21. This is also known as the Paris Agreement. And in the Paris Agreement, it is agreed that the global climate will, be, increase in the climate change, or temperatures. The global temperature should not increase more than 2 degrees Celsius pre-industrial levels by 2100, right? So the larger goal is limiting global temperatures 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels is the objective of Conference of Parties 21. However, if it is possible, all countries should come together and they should collectively limit the increase in temperatures to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels, right? So in order to achieve this objective, Azerbaijan has established this Climate Finance Action Fund to help to support developing and underdeveloped countries to meet their nationally determined contributions. And in fact, This Climate Finance Action Fund will be capitalized with the contributions from fossil fuel producing countries and also companies across oil and gas and even coal. Right? For example, the funding for these projects will be provided from the contributions which are being made from the fossil fuels, along with the coal, oil, gas companies. They should contribute to the Climate Finance Action Fund. So this Climate Finance Action Fund will become operational at the conclusion of initial fundraising round. So that means $1 billion fund will be raised when 10 contributing countries will commit as shareholders, right? So this is not yet came into effect, because the fundraising countries, at least 10 contributing countries, will commit themselves as shareholders as part of this Climate Finance Action Fund. And next is a river linking project. So you should also understand a few aspects with respect to the river linking project. So recently Maharashtra government has approved the Wainganga and Nil Ganga river linking project, right? So we'll understand about this Wainganga and Nil Ganga river interlinking project in a detailed manner. But recently, which state government has taken up or approved the Wainganga and Nil Ganga river interlinking project? So it is Maharashtra, right? So you have to remember this, it is Maharashtra. So Ken Betwa interlinking project, so again it is in Madhya Pradesh. And Krishna Godavari interlinking project in Andhra Pradesh. And in fact this Wainganga river is a tributary of river Godavari, right? So a national river interlinking project aimed to link the rivers which are having surplus water with the deficit rivers, so that the excess water from surplus region could be diverted into the deficit region. So for that particular purpose, national river interlinking project has been launched. Now imagine that when we look at the rivers throughout India, so we have the perennial rivers and also seasonal rivers. Now perennial rivers, mostly they are glacial origin, and we could see water throughout the year in perennial rivers, but it is not the case with the seasonal rivers in the this peninsular part of India, right? So sometimes we do have excess amount of water in some rivers or some part of India, and on the other hand, on a different part of India, on the other hand, so there's a drought like conditions in other parts. So in order to make sure that the water is used in a wise and efficient manner throughout India, thereby preventing water crisis or water shortage or conflicts between the states, the union government has launched National River Linking Project to aim this particular project aimed at linking the surplus water rivers with the deficient water rivers, right? So some details with respect to Wainganga and Nil Ganga river. So Wainganga river, the source of this Wainganga river is Mahadeo Hills in Madhya Pradesh. So that is the source of the Wainganga river. And in fact Wainganga, after its confluence with river Warda, is called as Pranhita. Now Pranhita is also the tributary of river Ganga. Now, so this Wainganga is after the confluence of Wainganga with the Warda river, it is known as Pranhita river. So you just look at the map because you get the clarity over this river. And Pranhita is the tributary of river Godavari. And in fact, the one thing that you need to understand, Pranhita is the largest tributary of river Godavari. Okay, so river Pranhita with its three principal branches such as Penganga, Warda and Wainganga is the largest tributary of river Ganga. And in fact, the riparian states of this Pranhita, including Chhattisgarh, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra and Telangana. So they are the riparian states of this river Pranhita. And in fact, the Nil Ganga is the main left bank tributary of river Purna. And in fact, Purna is one of the tributary of river Tapi. So Narmada and Tapi rivers, so they are west flowing rivers. So we all knew that the origin of these rivers in Vindhyas and Satpuras in Madhya Pradesh, right? So Nalganga is the left bank tributary of river Purna. For example, imagine that this is Tapi river, right? So this is Purna river, right? So this Nalganga is the left bank tributary of river Purna, and river Purna is one of the tributaries of river Tapi. Okay, so Nalganga is the tributary of Purna river, and Vainganga, it confluences of Vainganga with the Varda river, and ultimately it will become Pranhita river, and Pranhita river merges with river Godavari. Okay, so see, we all knew that river Godavari, Nasika Trayambakam, it is born in Nasika Trayambakam. It flows all the way to coast of Andhra Pradesh, right? So coastal Andhra Pradesh. And this Vainganga river, right? So Vainganga river origin in Mahadeo hills of Madhya Pradesh, and this Vainganga river meets with the Varda river, and when it meets with the Varda river, the confluence of this river is known as Pranhita river, right? So this is known as Pranhita river, and this Pranhita river is the largest tributary of river Godavari. Okay, so this is the largest tributary of Godavari, because along with Vainganga, Varda, so Penganga also meets with this Pranhita river, and because of that reason it is the largest tributary of river Godavari, right? But on the other hand, Nalganga is a tributary of river Purna, right? So it is river Purna. For example, imagine that this is Tapi river. Okay, so Tapi river, because Tapi river flows from west to east into the Arabian Sea. So this Purna river joins the Tapi river from the left. Okay, so it joins the Tapi river. This is Purna river, and this Nalganga river is the left bank tributary of the Purna river. Now the plan is to link this Vainganga of Godavari with this Nalganga of Purna river, right? So that is the river interlinking project. So next is Mission MOSUM. So we'll understand what is Mission MOSUM. So recently Union Cabinet approved Mission MOSUM with the budget outlay of 2000 crore rupees. Now what is this Mission MOSUM? So Mission MOSUM is envisaged to be a multifaceted initiative to tremendously boost India's weather and climate related science research and services. Now understand that because of climate change, global warming, it is very important that the weather became unpredictable, it became more dynamic, and it could also cause disasters, and therefore proper understanding of the weather patterns, climate change is also very, very important. So because of that reason, the Indian government has launched Mission MOSUM with the total budgetary outlay of 2000 crore for the better understanding of the weather and climate related aspects and doing research and also services. Now what are the key features of Mission MOSUM? So the key features including establishing a wide network of radars, satellites and wind profilers, radiometers, high performance computers, artificial intelligence, machine learning based models, and multifaceted weather observation and prediction. So all these are some of the key features which are part of the Mission MOSUM because it involves science, research and services. Now what is the implementing agency of Mission MOSUM? So Ministry of Earth Sciences, right? So this particular ministry is the implementing agency of the Mission MOSUM. So three institutes which play a very important role under mission MOSUM. So under Ministry of Earth Sciences, particularly Indian Meteorological Department, National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, and also Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology would primarily implement this mission, right? So there may be a question that which of the following institutes will implement the mission MOSUM. So you have to remember Indian Meteorological Department and Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology and also National Center for Medium Range Weather Forecasting, and they are under the Ministry of Earth Sciences and they will implement the mission MOSUM. So there are two phases under mission MOSUM. In the first phase, it will be implemented till March 2026. And it focuses on further expansion of the existing observation network by adding around 70 Doppler radars, HPCs, and setting up 10 wind profilers and radio meters. And in the second phase after 2026, so it focuses on adding satellites and aircraft for understanding weather and climate and science research and services, etc. So next topic is Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure marks its 5th anniversary, right? So it is very important because Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is an initiative which is launched by the government of India. So particularly aiming at providing financial assistance, technical assistance for the developing, underdeveloped countries in the global south with respect to building, disaster resilient infrastructure. Now, it is very important for the developing and underdeveloped countries to have the disaster resilient infrastructure, but on the other hand, due to limited finances and lack of technology, these developing countries in the global south, they are unable to afford the disaster resilient infrastructure. But on the other hand, India is known as the leader of the global south, so therefore India has taken up the initiative of bringing countries together and also collaborating on building the disaster resilient infrastructure for that particular reason. So this Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure has been established by the government of India. So first we'll try to understand what is the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, and then we'll understand its significance. So at UN Climate Action Summit 2019, so it was launched by India, right? So when was the Coalition on Disaster Resilient Infrastructure was launched? It was launched by India at United Nations Climate Action Summit 2019. Now, as of now, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure has 40 countries and 7 organizations. And in fact, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure is a global partnership of nations, United Nations agencies, multilateral development banks, and also the private sector agencies. So all these different agencies are part of the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. Now, what is the objective? So I've told you the objective: promote resilience of the infrastructure systems to climate and disaster risks, and also ensuring sustainable development. And remember that United Nations itself has come up with the Sustainable Development Goals from 2015 to 2013, and there are around 17 Sustainable Development Goals, right? So these 17 Sustainable Development Goals have to be achieved, right? So in fact, the Global Infrastructure Resilience Report is being released by the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure. And recently, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure has announced 2.5 million fund under the Urban Infrastructure Resilience Program to enhance climate resilience of cities in 30 low and middle income countries, so including India. So remember that I've told you that these developing, underdeveloped countries in the global south need finances, they need technology to build resilient infrastructure. So as part of this, the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure announced some financial assistance of $2.5 million fund for Urban Infrastructure Resilience Program. So that will help enhance the climate resilience of cities in 30 low and middle income countries. That includes India as well. And in fact, The Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure has also taken other initiatives as well, such as Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, which is also known as IRIS, Infrastructure for Resilient Island States. So this aims to promote resilient, sustainable and inclusive infrastructure in small island developing states. Right? So I hope you have understood about the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and when it was formed. So the next topic is about tardigrades. So what are these tardigrades and why it is in news? Now, this is how tardigrades usually look like, and they are very often in news. So tardigrades are also known as water bears or moss piglets. Okay, so they are either moss piglets or water bears. And in fact, these tardigrades are tiny 8-legged aquatic animals. So they are found in almost all habitats on the earth. Okay, so apart from that, these tardigrades also comprise of two main classes. So one is Heterotardigrada and Eutardigrada. So these are two main classes of tardigrades. And in fact, so why tardigrades are in news? What is the importance or significance of these tardigrades? So the special aspect or the important aspect with respect to tardigrades is that so they can actually survive the extreme environmental conditions, like they can sustain in extreme heat, freezing cold, ultraviolet radiation, and they can even live in outer space as well. Right? So because of this resilience of this particular species, it is in news. Right? So they are very tiny animals, but they can survive in extreme environmental conditions, even if it is extreme heat like conditions or freezing cold, ultraviolet radiation, on any of the conditions they can sustain. And that's why it is very important, and that's why space firms or space agencies across the world are planning to use or test tardigrades in the outer space. And in fact, these tardigrades are also able to survive harsh conditions because they're capable of almost stopping their metabolism, which is known as cryptobiosis. And in fact, they can even stop their metabolism. However, they start this metabolic process only when conditions are better, and that's how they could survive in extreme weather conditions, right? So this is that's why these tardigrades are increasingly in news. Here we have some news articles which are important, and they are also in news today. The first article is Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Nigeria. And in this backdrop, we'll briefly have we'll have a look into India and Nigeria relations in a very, very comprehensive manner. The context is that Prime Minister Narendra Modi recently paid an official visit to Nigeria. And on this particular visit, both India and Nigeria have reaffirmed their strategic partnership because they already have the strategic partnership with each other. Right? So strategic partnership means that it is a partnership at the highest level, and partnership which deals with the number of areas, for example, security, defense, trade, commerce, science, space. So all these different areas, but in-depth cooperation and engagement between two different countries is known as the strategic partnership, and both India and Nigeria have the strategic partnership. And Nigeria is a very important country for India in Africa. Okay, so the high level talk between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, so it focused on further strengthening India-Nigeria partnership and cooperation in number of critical areas such as defense relationship, trade, energy and agriculture. So these are the areas that are being stressed on in this recent visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Nigeria. And this visit also marks the first by any Indian Prime Minister to Nigeria in last 17 years, and that's why it is important as well. And apart from that, some other key facts with respect to Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Nigeria. So it is also in news that Nigeria has also conferred Prime Minister Narendra Modi with its highest national award, that is the Grand Commander of the Order of Niger. Right, so this is known as the Grand Commander of the Order of Niger, is the highest national award of Nigeria that is being conferred on Prime Minister Narendra Modi, particularly for his contribution to flourishing India-Nigeria relations. Okay, so thereby making him, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the second foreign dignitary to receive this Grand Commander of the Order of Niger. Right, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi is the only second foreign dignitary to receive Grand Commander of the Order of Niger from Nigeria. However, the first one was Queen Elizabeth. So Queen Elizabeth was the only foreign dignitary who was awarded this Grand Commander of the Order of Niger way back in the year 1969. So after that, Prime Minister Narendra Modi is given this award, the highest national award of Nigeria. And in fact, so this award adds to a growing list of international honors, because not just Nigeria but number of other countries, for example Russia announced, France announced, Palestine announced. So all these different countries have announced their highest civilian awards to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and Nigeria has become the 16th country to recognize him for his contributions on the global stage, and that's why it is very, very important. And in this visit of Prime Minister Narendra Modi to Nigeria, in this visit, so some memorandum of understanding MOUs were signed in different areas. So if you look at those memorandum of understanding, so it covers the cultural exchange between India and Nigeria, the customs cooperation and survey collaboration. So these are the areas, right? So these are three areas where the memorandum of understanding exchanged between India and Nigeria. And in fact, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi specially stressed on the contribution of India's diaspora community which is living in Nigeria. So we all knew that a diaspora is a very, very important for the soft power of any country, but particularly India, because we have 60,000 Indian community living in Nigeria, and they play a very important role in further strengthening relations between India and Nigeria. And that's why Prime Minister Narendra Modi lauded the contribution of Indian diaspora as a key pillar of the bilateral relations. And in fact, a significant theme of discussion was a shared vision of India and Nigeria to champion the interests of the global South. Remember that India is very often call itself as the leader of the global South, and that is being reflected in its 2023 G20 summit. So in that summit, India has introduced a resolution to include African Union as part of the G20 summit. So that's why India very often call itself as the leader of the global South, because global South as a region has been facing the common challenges, the common problems, and India is a country with a substantial economic power, military power, a lot of soft power, and because of all these reasons, India could play a leadership role for the global South. And we'll look into India-Nigeria relations, so different areas where India and Nigeria relations are flourishing. So first and foremost, one thing that we need to understand, we have just discussed that India and Nigeria have the strategic partnership. So they are being the strategic partners since 2007 with growing economic, energy and defense collaboration. So they have a strong economic, energy and defense collaboration. So when we talk about the defense collaboration, remember that 85% of the fossil fuels, particularly the crude oil, is being imported from other countries. So in order to diversify our supply chains, that we not just depend on the Middle East we not just depend on Russia, rather we should also have the other alternative sources, because diversification of supply chains, energy supply chains, is very, very important. As part of this policy of India has been looking for the alternatives, and Nigeria can be another reliable energy alternative for India. So therefore, both countries have gone for the strategic partners. So they become strategic partners since 2007. However, today more than 200 Indian companies operate in Nigeria. And in fact, so Indian companies also invest around 27 billion US dollars in different sectors, right? So whether it is agriculture, whether it is IT services, manufacturing, so in all these different areas, so around 200 Indian companies actively present in Nigeria, and they invest 27 billion US dollars in various sectors in Nigeria. And in fact, Indian companies are the second largest employment provider in Nigeria after the Nigerian federal government. So by this, you can understand how India and Indian companies are very, very important for Nigeria. And that's why, India's strong strategic partnership with Nigeria is very important. And apart from that, so India is also one of the major trading partner for Nigeria, because Indian products accounting for 70% of the pharmaceutical market in Nigeria. And apart from that, Nigeria is also the second largest trading partner of India in the African region, with the total bilateral trade between India and Nigeria worth of 11.8 billion in the year 22-23. But still, it is far below than the potential. Still, it is lesser than what Nigeria and China have in terms of their bilateral trade. So therefore, there is a need to substantially increase or explore new areas of bilateral trade. So where India and Nigeria can work together, they can enhance the bilateral trade. That is very important. In the year 23-24, the bilateral trade between India and Nigeria stood at $7.89 billion. And after that, the defense cooperation is another very important pillar of India-Nigeria cooperation. Right. So within defense and security cooperation, so there are four main areas of cooperation. One is United Nations peacekeeping. So we all knew that India is one of the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping force. So as part of the United Nations peacekeeping force, India has deployments in several countries of Africa, Sudan, and even Nigeria also. Right. So India has been training African officers, particularly the military personnel from a number of African countries, for the capacity building, development of professionalism of the security military personnel. And even Nigerian officers also come, and they are also trained by India. And so Indian Navy is also known as the net security provider in the region. So therefore, Indian Navy also has a very active and very important role in maintaining security in the Indian Ocean region. So that is crucial for the global maritime climate. And apart from that, so India's defense industry is also actively engaging in Africa. So Indian defense industry supplying hardware like helicopters and fighter jets, and Indian technical and economic cooperation program. So that offers Nigerian defense personnel 150 training slots every year. Now remember that Indian technical and economic cooperation program is a program that has been launched by the government of India to provide capacity building, to ensure capacity building and technical assistance to most of the countries in the African continent. So as part of this particular program, so Indian government provides training, military training to the Nigerian defense personnel. So right, so 150 training slots are being allocated for the Nigerian personnel every year. And India's computer emergency response team has partnered with the Nigeria's computer emergency response team NG to strengthen cybersecurity cooperation and also ensuring better protection from the cyber threats as well. So this is the defense cooperation between India and Nigeria. So apart from that, So pharmaceutical and healthcare cooperation is also another very important pillar between India and Nigeria, because overall Indian pharmaceutical industry plays a very important role in supplying the pharmaceuticals to Nigeria, because uh, Indian medicines alone account for around 70% of the medicines in the Nigerian market, right? So in fact, India is also very well known as the pharmacy of the world, right, because of the generic drugs that it produces and export of the pharmaceuticals to number of countries, and because of that reason India is known as the pharmacy of the world. And in Nigeria, due to its affordable and high quality medicines, right? So in fact, India is also assisting Nigeria during COVID-19 pandemic also. Under Vaccine My 3 program, India has provided a lot of vaccines to Nigeria, because vaccine equity is very important. But on the other hand, the developed countries have been showing vaccine nationalism. They are just stockpiling the vaccines in their respective countries. So therefore India generously came forward, and India has also provided a lot of vaccines to most of these poor countries to ensure vaccine equity and also protect the people from this particular disease, right? So apart from that, agriculture is another area where India and Nigeria can focus on. They can cooperate upon, because food security for both India and Nigeria is also very important, considering a huge population that these two countries have. Agriculture employs about 70% of Nigeria's population, and only 44% of Nigeria's arable land is currently cultivated. And in fact, Indian companies are already involved in edible oil plantations and are interested in grain farming in Nigeria as well. So oil, gas and economic cooperation is another area of cooperation between India and Nigeria, because remember that Nigeria has oil reserves and India wanted to diversify its energy basket, and because of that reason India has been looking for the alternatives like Nigeria. So Nigeria could supply energy, so it is a reliable source of energy supplies to India. And India also imports about 6 million barrels of oil per day. So in this context, Nigeria will help India reduce its dependence on Middle East and also some other economies, because of geopolitical tensions, because of volatility in Middle East, the oil prices would be suddenly increased, and that would hurt India's economy. So therefore we have multiple benefits with a strong strategic partnership with Nigeria, and that has to be leveraged in an effective manner, right? So overall, that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. So if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. So thank you.